All right, welcome back to another episode of what I'm now calling, which I hadn't had any sort of inclination as to what I was going to call it when I did the first one a few weeks back with David or Onkliosaur. But we're calling this the Championship Deck Series for my channel as a little sort of side project that has to do with winners and their decks of Pauper or cPDH tournaments. And so this is also a thing that I started sort of as a sister project with Clay, because Clay's been doing interviews with all of the winners over time. I got a couple interviews early on the Sanctuary stuff, but I hadn't touched on any of the other tournaments. And this last one was the Common Cause that David had won. And that was the first one where me and Clay had the conversation where I was going to kind of do a follow-up interview beyond what he was doing. He got on top of this one right away, same day. I guess it was the next day for him, same day for you. With all that aside, Championship Deck Series, this is number 2, and this time we are talking about the most recent Sanctuary tournament, Sanctuary 5, that just concluded this past weekend, and I am joined here by unpronounceable username XRYLYLY, whatever you want to call it, aka Jonathan, which is a lot easier to say. Jonathan, welcome. Thank you for joining me, and congrats on your dub. That was well deserved.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, so it's interesting to. I mean, I got to see your face on his interview, but yeah, after having heard somebody's voice for countless hours, and then to actually put a face to the voices is always interesting as well. It's nice to see you, and nice to be able to get together and talk. So. Basically, what Clay has been doing with his series is just interviewing players and trying to get to know them a little bit, and then some of their prep going into tournaments and more of a personal get to know you kind of thing. And I've been trying to do a more detailed look at like the deck itself. Obviously, there's going to be some personal touch in there as well. I have a tradition here where anytime I have anyone on my podcast or my channel, anything where I'm going to have an interview sort of thing with someone who's not yet to be in this talking format. Obviously, you've played on my channel as far as gameplay goes, but this is the first time we're actually having a candid conversation. So what I would like to have you share with the class is, a brief how you got into Magic, your history with the game, that sort of thing. If you started, when you started, how you started, what led you into playing EDH, what led you into Pauper, what led you to become a tournament grinder, that sort of thing. So with that said, let us know.
So I started Magic in 2014, 2015, where Khans of Tarkir and Dragons of Tarkir came out. So that was during high school, and some other friends were playing it. I was like, oh, that game looks cool, and then just kind of got into the game from there. Slowly built our way into Commander, and Commander was getting more popular, and it's just a cheaper format than, the 60 card formats. So, and then I discovered the competitive scene, so cEDH, which I just like watched on YouTube, never played it myself until recently. And then I was like, I wonder if there's like an affordable version of this format. And I found on YouTube cPDH. I forgot the name of the channel, but it was one of the first videos like out there. And I was like, oh, cool, I want to get into it. I want to like break this format. That was my main goal. I wanted to break the format, wanted to do stuff new. And yeah, a few months later, found the server and just started jamming games.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's how we met initially, and so I met quite a few people that are in the sphere. I was kind of in a similar boat too. I went from playing 60 card to playing Commander to playing the arms race, and then getting into cEDH, and obviously I still am big into cEDH, but definitely not affordable at all. And I kind of pushed to a point where I got a list on the database, and I was like, man, that's cool, but I haven't really done anything with tournaments there. I have the desire, I just haven't pulled the trigger yet, and I've kind of been dipping my toes into the competitive Pauper tournament scene to try and kind of get some practice at it before going, because some of the cEDH stuff is larger buy-ins and larger prize pools and all that stuff too, so I didn't want to like throw money at the wall, so to speak, just for to lose. But yeah, it's kind of the same when I discovered the Pauper scene. It was kind of like, yeah, I want to do something to make my mark on this, and I can't for the life of me win a damn tournament, but I'm going to keep trying. Eventually, maybe we'll get there. I don't know if it's going to take me having to play something like a Gretchen to get there, but still trying with some of my own ideas, and I think eventually maybe something will stick. But all right, so cool. You basically been playing for then about 10 years, roughly?
Yeah, about 10 years.
Makes me feel old, but at the same time, I am old, so I guess you can't really avoid that when it's the truth. I guess the first question, I guess what I should say, what we should do first is introduce the commander here. So most people will probably be familiar with the card. It's been around for a few years. It's also proven itself in a number of different ways. But the commander in question here is Gretchen Titchwillow, which is a 0/4 for a green and a blue. It's a legendary halfling druid, and it has the activated ability to a green and a blue, draw a card. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Obviously, on its face, it is a draw engine. There is no tap in the ability, so it is repeatable at any point in time. It's instant speed. It doesn't have like a sorcery limitation or anything like that. And then also allows you to just ramp if you happen to have lands in your hand, or you happen to draw a land off of its activated ability. You can just slam it onto the field, and it doesn't limit you on that either. So seems to be a very powerful engine, which is probably a good portion of the reasoning for playing it. But what led you to choose to play this over, like, say, one of your other decks, like Malcolm X or whatever?
Basically, the consistency of Gretchen over all my other lists. It just is packed full of so many combo pieces. This deck is combo haven, and the ability to just constantly draw cards in the command zone is really, really powerful in a format where the rest of the deck is just made of commons. There are some good draw commons, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of blue cantrips and things like that.
Yeah.
But in terms of like repeatable value, Gretchen is like the top of the list there.
It reminds me, and some of its play patterns kind of remind me of what Thrasios X decks do in like cDH, where especially, when you get access to like Seaborn Muse and stuff, to where it's just like every single turn cycle, it's just, activate Thrasios, activate. And it does a similar kind of thing where it either slams a land onto the field or it puts a card in your hand. In this case, it's done a little differently, and it costs the same amount, but it does require colored pips, which is a little harder to do, and obviously you don't have all the other bells and whistles you would in the other format. But it feels to me like a very similar sort of play style. So you mentioned that it is chock full of commons, and as I am trying to make this into sort of a deck tech for anyone who may be interested in picking up the list and or isn't familiar with the list, newer players, even older players that maybe just don't know how certain parts of the list work, I can tell you kind of, sort of, like, I understand most of it, but I don't know the exact ins and outs of every single, combo. So if you had to pick one as like the linchpin of the deck, the thing that you go for or try to find first, like, what would that combo look like?
So the best combo, fastest, quickest combo would be a land untapper, or the creature that we call a land untapper, which has the ability tap, untap a land, a aura on the land that makes the land tap for 2 blue or an additional blue, and Freed from the Real, which is an enchantment that lets you repeatedly untap the creature by paying 1 blue. So as long as your land makes 2 blue or more, you net infinite mana from that, and then from there you can untap the rest of your lands, get your green mana, and then just go into Gretchen, draw your entire deck, and you win from there, basically.
Okay, so some examples of cards like that. So land untappers being your Arbor Elf, which is just, tap, untap target forest. You've got Portent Tracker, same idea, tap, untap a land. Rime Tender, it's a snow permanent. Sculptor is also snow land. What else you got? Voyaging Satyr, Blossom Dry. I mean, there's just, you name it, they're here. There's a whole
there's
load
a
of them. Basically, they're all 1 or 2 mana, maybe 3 mana, and they have the ability to tap. So obviously, they do have summoning sickness, so they're not going to be able to do this the turn they come down. But eventually, you'll have out a couple of these, maybe you only really need 1, and then you can start to do your thing. And then some of the enchantments, you've got, Utopias for All's Wild Growths, and then Freed from the Real, as you mentioned, being kind of a big part of this, is a aura enchantment for 2 and a blue, and it says enchant creature. So this will go on to one of those land untappers. and then it says pay a blue, tap enchanted creature, or pay a blue, untap enchanted creature. And obviously the tap part isn't relevant because the things tap themselves, but you essentially tap them, untap the land that has the 2 mana, and then tap the land for the 2 mana, use one of the mana into free to untap the untapper, and then thereby netting a single mana, and then you just continue from there. You obviously said that your outlet is Gretchen, in the sense of, like, draw your deck, put out all your lands as you're going. You're going to have a lot of mana at that point. But how do you win? So, like, in cDH and other formats, like, there's Thassa's Oracle, there's Jace, there's other ways to just, say, win the game, or there's big spells like, you know, Finale of Devastation, or even Craterhoof, where it's like, this big thing comes down, makes everything, all your creatures big, and you swing out to kill. How do you win after you have your deck in your hand?
So winning there's a lot of different ways Gretchens do this. Every Gretchen runs the card Capsize, which is a 3 mana bounce spell with buyback, which lets you return target permanent, so including lands. So you can, with infinite mana, you can pretty much Cyclonic Rift and get rid of all the lands of all your opponent's boards. Once that is done, you basically either can create a bunch of creatures by bouncing, for example, Blighted Burgeoning to make a bunch of Incubate tokens, or you can, if you're on like a time limit and you're on the turn you need to win, some people do an Archaeomancer loop with like a force draw spell like Compulsive Research. I am on the card Find the Path, which lets me venture into the dungeon, and by repeatedly bouncing that and casting it, I can just loop into the dungeon and drain everyone for all the life. So the chosen dungeon.
The Lost Mine of Phandelver, right? This is the one with the
No. Tomb of Annihilation. Just each player loses 1 life, and then each player loses 2 life unless they discard a card. Each player loses 2 life unless they sacrifice an artifact, creature, or land. And to get this life back, I can infinitely bounce one of the enchantments like Verdant Haven, which gives me 2 life whenever it enters.
Okay, so that was my question, because I was looking at this on paper, and I'm like, okay, I get Capsize. Capsize makes sense. You bounce everybody's stuff, they can't do anything. The draw spell that you just mentioned, I've heard that one used as an outlet before. I've used it as an outlet in a couple Flicker decks, the Compulsive Research or whatever, because that can be targeted at someone else, force them to draw their deck out, and then when you pass turn, they have no deck, and they just lose the game. I'm going to venture and say that this is probably something that other Gretchen players maybe aren't doing, because I have literally never heard of anybody caring about dungeons with Gretchen.
Yeah, I guess so. I just wanted to make the finishing as streamlined as possible and not being able to interact with a Fairy Macabre, because that's the one spell that can actually stop the Compulsive Research loop if you're not too careful.
That makes sense. For those that aren't familiar, Fairy Macabre is a creature that's in your hand that can be cast as a creature, which is pretty useless, but it can be discarded to remove a couple cards from a graveyard, and can, as Jonathan said here, screw up some game-winning combo lines. And if you don't have that additional redundancy for that part of the combo line, then you're probably gonna lose. You obviously have a lot of redundancy for the key pieces of the untappers and the land enchantments. Then you've got that as a couple pieces for your win. Are there any other... I'm not seeing anything here, but you may be able to tell me if there's anything else that you can do to win a game if, say, you get pushed off of, that path, per se?
Yeah, well, for example, if Capsize is exiled somehow, there's still a way for me to loop the enchantments. It does go through the graveyard, though. You basically use a Borrow Breezecaller to bounce a land with a bunch of enchantments on it, put the enchantments in the graveyard, then return the enchantments. And you Mystic Sanctuary to get back the Revive the Shire. And then you kind of just loop it like that.
Okay, so then it's still the same, go through the dungeon, but yeah, that's actually kind of cool. So, a Borrow Breezecaller, let's run through that real quick. It is a 1/1 for 1 and a blue, Moonfolk Wizard with flying, and it has 2 generic return a land you control to owner's hand, untap target land, so it is a land untapper in itself to some degree. But then, so you said you use that with...
Revive the Shire and Mystic Sanctuary.
Yeah, so Revive the Shire, 1 and a green, sorcery, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand, create a food token, which probably doesn't matter all that much. And then everybody should know Mystic Sanctuary by now. It's a island that ETB's untapped if you control 3 or more other islands, and then when it does enter untapped, you can put instant sorcery card from your grave on top of your library, and then obviously you can activate Gretchen, etc. to put that into your hand. So yeah, and then you basically said bounce the whichever one has the find the path on it, or a couple other enchantments, and then just go from there. Yeah, I've not seen anybody win without having basically the first combo that we've discussed. So that's interesting to actually have a whole different backup line, which on paper I couldn't have told you that was a thing, because looking at all these cards is like, yeah, okay, I see kind of what this does, I see kind of what that does. That's an interesting, completely different line. Cool. So I mean, that kind of covers the main ways you win. At that rate, would you classify this more as a combo deck, mid-range? I mean, I don't really think it's control because there's only counter spells. I wouldn't call this a control list myself, but would you lean more towards combo or mid-range?
I think it's a healthy mix between mid-range and combo. Like, you're not trying to win like super fast, and you're trying to grind out the game, but then you're finishing the game with like combo after combo after combo attempts. So it's fine line between mid-range and combo there.
I think Gretchen has an interesting thing too about it, that despite the fact that, well, first of all, it's super cheap, so like it can come down very early, but it also kind of almost has like built-in ward, because it's like removing it doesn't really stop the problem. It's usually, somebody gets a Gretchen out, they get a land untapper out, maybe they've got a couple enchantments, and everybody at the table is like, okay, we're on high alert, we know something's got to happen, so then somebody's like, well, just remove the Gretchen, and then you're like, okay, cool, now we're safe, and then Gretchen just comes down the next turn, and you still lose the game. I've also seen it where people are like, okay, cool, kill the land untappers, and then, another one just comes down the next turn. It's just so packed with redundancy that it's hard to keep it down. Like you said, it's multiple combo attempts before you actually get there or lose. And losing seems to happen less often than I'd like to admit, than the amount of times that I have played against this thing. So then, outside of the combo pieces, which do take up a good portion of the list, would you say you have any other spicy tech that maybe people wouldn't have seen before, or maybe is unique to your version of this list?
Revive the Shy, as we mentioned before in that loop, is probably unique to my deck. Most people are just on Reclaim. I like the ability just to put it straight into my hands, even though it doesn't target as many cards as Reclaim can.
Right.
And the food is can be relevant in some games as well, the free life.
I'm a fan. I hated food when they first printed it, but after Lord of the Rings, food is just so good. I run it in so many decks. Even some of my cDH decks have a card that makes a food, and it's you don't really care, but then there's that one time where you're like, that 3 life made the difference. I didn't lose the game because I had that extra 3 life. It's kind of funny. So, looking at the tournament itself, I know we played a game together, and that was one of those games where it kind of felt like you got hated on a bit and didn't really get to do a whole lot. I believe we ended up going to draw. Was that the one that did we go to time on that one?
Yeah, we went to time on that one.
Yeah, so, I mean, it was kind of, everybody was kind of just doing their thing, but also responsibly stopping everyone else. In the other further rounds, did anything happen that stood out to you as being really cool that you'd want to share, something interesting or a cool way that you managed to pull out a win or stop someone's win, etc.? Anything that stands out?
Nothing that really stands out. I mean, I won my second game with a simple Galvanic Alchemist attached to soul bonded to a land untapper. Just fought for a bunch of interaction and just went off. Nothing really special happened in those games. Third game, lost that one to Malcolm Breaches. That was a sad game. Everyone was just doing their thing. I was stacked up on my land enchantments. No land untappers, but I was getting there. And then Malcolm Breaches just had everything.
Yeah, sometimes that's just the way it is. You versus another combo deck, sometimes the other guy's got it before you do. How did the finals go? I want to say I went back and watched the VOD, but I'm not remembering exactly. So how did the finals go for you? Was that kind of how you
finals
expected?
Was great. My second 7 was Urban Burgeoning and some land enchantments and some lands. And one throwaway card, which was Archaeomancer. And I was like, cool, this is turn 1 Urban Burgeoning, followed by Gretchen, followed by Landora, followed by Landora. And that was the game plan. So I was just like, I'm just going to activate Gretchen every single turn on each of my opponent's turns. And it worked out fine. No one had any enchantment removal. No one had the bounce spell for the land until until it was too late.
That's kind of how my I obviously didn't make it to the finals, but that's kind of how my round 3 went. My first round was with you, and we went to draw. Second round probably should have been a draw, but because we had some one of our players had technical difficulties, and we got an extension of like 5 minutes, 2 minutes. I don't remember what it was, but it was just enough of an extension to where we hit time, and it would have been a draw. But then within that little last couple minutes, Gator managed to pull something out of his ass and got a win right within the last like 30 seconds. I was like, man, you son of a bitch. Because if he would have win and we would have had a tie, if I would have been able to pull out dub in third game, I actually might have made it because I would have ended up having 7 points. And I think you squeaked in with 6 or somebody else may have squeaked in with 6. Yes. It was crazy. So
two people squeaked in with 6.
Yeah, so like had I gotten that second draw and then gotten a win, I was like, oh man, I still have a chance. So I went into game 3 like kind of bummed because it was like, well, I didn't get that, so I'm 0-1-1. So even if I got a win there, I was going to be in the same boat. But there was still that shot. So I went into that game like going, okay, well I can at least make top 8 and get my money back. So good enough. And then I got stuck in the pod with Lotad, and he just dropped Larry turn 1, and literally no one... Same thing you were describing in the finals. No one had shit for him. So he just drained us, and drained us, and drained us, and then it was just... We're dead. Cool. Like, nobody could do anything. We were all just looking at each other like, fucking do something. And nobody had anything to do, so we just ended up dying. It was crazy, but... Sometimes that's how it is, man. You sit down at a table and people just have your number. And other times you're the one that's got all the answers and you get to go ham. And that's cool though. At least you got to pull it out. Even if you did just squeak in at the end, that don't matter. You still got the dub. So, who were your opponents in the finals? I forget.
So there was a Malcolm Breaches player in seat 1. There was the other Gretchen. There was only 2 Gretchens in the tournament, and we both topped forward.
Of course.
Gretchen in seat 2. Seat 3 was Tony on Val and Shadow Thieves. The Demir also were freed from the real deck. In fact, all 4 decks were freed from the real decks, which is funny.
I kind of already touched on this as far as like what maybe your differences are. We've already talked about a couple cards that are unique to your list that made it kind of more your own. Is there anything after? I mean, hard to say. How do you have weaknesses when you're the one that won the whole thing? But did you notice anything where you were like, maybe I don't like this card, and maybe I should swap it out for something else?
Yeah, there was a few points where I was playing a Mystic Sanctuary and there was nothing in my graveyard.
Yeah.
And then Crop Rotation also felt like a bit of a dead card because it gets Mystic Sanctuary, and Mystic Sanctuary was feeling like a dead card. It was basically those two. Merchant Scroll was also feeling a bit iffy at some points because there wasn't really good tutor targets.
I like Merchant Scroll, sort of. To me, it kind of has felt that way too. I think Mystic Sanctuary is probably a card you leave in because it's just a land. And there's going to be times where it doesn't do anything, but it's still just a land. I mean, you're going to cut it for a basic, sure, but then like that basic is never going to have the upside, right? So you might as well just play it. Yep. But I could see where Crop Rotation, if that's your only tutor, I'm not huge on Crop Rotation in this format as much because there are a lot less utility lands. When you're in cDH and you can go tutor up a Gaia's Cradle every time, you do that every time, right? But you also have the option of maybe it goes and gets you something else like an Emergent Zone or some other utility land that does see play in other formats that are obviously not legal here. But just having a Crop Rotation take up a slot for a land that you didn't feel was always necessary anyway. Plus you're running Archaeomancer, so I mean like you already have a creature effect that's doing that. So yeah, I could see where maybe Crop Rotation could go. Merchant Scroll, I guess that goes and gets you a protection spell, a counter spell, when you need it. But
yeah, it can. It gets Aura Bounce or High Tide, which High Tide is a combo piece because it makes your island tap for additional blue.
Right.
So it still can fetch a combo piece, but that's really it. Hydroform as well is a great tutor target. But otherwise, yeah, it felt a bit lackluster in the tournament. It's still a great card. I'm not going to cut it for anything.
I was gonna say, if you felt like some of those were weaknesses, do you have any idea what you would swap out? Merchant Scroll, maybe you keep it. What about Crop Rotation? If you were gonna cut that, what would you put in its place?
Swap it for a Reclaim, I guess, because that's basically the effect you use it for to get Mystic Sanctuary to put something on the top. Reclaim does the same thing. So.
Makes sense. Yeah, and then that's kind of redundancy with the Revive the Shire too. So you have 2 pieces that do the same thing. So you have a multitude of ways. Because there are exile effects and things where you're something can get hated out of your grave. Plus, you have redundancy in like every other piece of the puzzle except for that. So maybe that is a good replacement. Okay, so this one's a little more hypothetical, but like obviously we know Modern Horizons 3 is coming, and they are printing a whole bunch of stuff that seems to be impactful for the format. But just as a thought experiment, if there was something that you could like wish for to get printed, like something you would want that would just give the deck that extra oomph, like what do you have any sort of idea of like something that you would want if you could have it?
Well, it would just be more combo pieces, really.
I mean, sure, but like, what is? I guess what does that look like? So, like, the reason I ask this question is because, like, I ask myself with Sivers all the time because that's kind of like the list I've been trying to push, and we just talked about before recording here that they finally printed something that makes for an infinite combo in the colors that already uses pieces in the deck that I'm already using. So like initially when I built the list, it was built in a certain way, and then I discovered stickers and then figured out that with that cat and stickers I could have this infinite combo, and I tried it for a long time and it never fucking worked because you have to have the right sticker, and if you don't get the right sticker then it just isn't there and yada yada. So just kind of annoying. So it was always like the thing that I would want is to have this extra something printed that would give me a combo with something I already have. And that's kind of coming down the pipeline now. So it was just it's a thought experiment. If you don't have anything in particular, that's totally fine. It was just if you had a wish list, what would that look like?
They wouldn't print it, but if there was a spell with buyback which untapped a land, that would be great.
There you go. I mean, they could print something like that. I don't see why not. Buyback has always been like 3 or 4 on top of whatever the spell's cost is. So I mean, look at Capsize. Capsize costs 3 and costs 3 to buy back. That's 6 mana to do one thing. That's not good, per se, but if you can make infinite mana, it is. And that's where it shines. But, like, just a regular old cast to Capsize feels kind of bad. Even just a Capsize with buyback. 6 mana to bounce one thing feels terrible. That's a terrible rate. But, again, if you can make infinite mana, that's great. So, I could see where they could have something that's, like, 2 green and 1 untap target land, buyback, you know. It could work. And then, yeah, that would be kind of cool with Archaeomancer loops. I could see that. So, going forward, you've already won with this deck. Are you planning on playing... what are your plans for the future as far as, like, are you looking to play in every tournament that comes up next, or are you just going to wait for the next Sanctuary? Following on with that, do you have plans to continue to try and play this deck, or do you want to try and push one of your other decks, or potentially build a whole new thing? What are your plans for the future as a tournament grinder?
Definitely will try to enter as much tournaments as possible that is at a good time for me in Australia, which is
that is
difficult.
Always the bummer, yeah.
So Sanctuary 5 was good. It was like early in the morning, but not too early. The next tournament that's happening, Common Clause, is just too early. It's like at 1 a.m. That's not gonna happen.
I have the same problem. It's like 9 a.m. for me, I think, and I'm usually not home from work yet, so I don't think I'll be able to do it either.
In terms of if I'm going to still play Gretchen, like eventually I'll go back to Gretchen, but I want to try and get my other decks out there and even brew something as well. I've been brewing a lot. I'm a brewer at heart, and I'm just trying to find the right deck which can compete with Gretchen and maybe even top it.
I think that's the issue that a lot of us have too. I mean, I'm same brewer at heart. I'm always brewing, always trying to come up with that next cool thing. I've also been sticking kind of the same deck because I'm still trying to get it there. And every time it's just feeling incrementally better. I play it against people in practice. I play against top-end decks when it's not in a tournament setting. And I win and I'm feeling good. And I'm like, this is great. And then I go in the tournament and I just scrub out every time. And I don't know if it's a mental thing, if it's just circumstantial. Whatever the case is, I'm still trying to prove the one list that I've been running. But... I am working on some other ones. I'm actually working on trying to bring back one of the boogeymen of the format that existed long ago that I don't see anybody playing anymore, and it wasn't really even my idea. Somebody else pointed me in that direction, and I've been playtesting it here and there, and it feels like it's got some potential. It feels like it could sit up there with Gretchen. So we're going to see. I don't know. I'm going to try and get in as many reps as I can, and maybe come next Sanctuary, maybe I'll unveil it. But again, I am still trying to push my own deck that I brewed from scratch because, you know, that's no better feeling than being like, you know, I built that and I won with it. And nobody can say it sucks anymore, you know? And that's what I've been trying to do with the damn deck since I brewed it. So it's what we're working on, but I may take a page out of your book and just go for one of these wildly consistent top-end decks and just play it. I mean, I played Malcolm Kedis in my first tournament ever, and I got a win out of the however many rounds it was. I did get a win that time at least, but still didn't make it to the final, so just haven't found that stride. I'm hoping that it happens eventually, because I'd like to be on the other end of one of these interviews one day, but we'll see how that goes. So, next one... I'm assuming Bobby is going to keep the Sanctuary stuff in that sort of time frame so that you and Lotad and some of the other people that are not American can actually play with us. So at least we'll probably be able to see you at Sanctuary 6. I will also, of course, put in the show notes links to your deck list and all of that. I am doing a thing where I basically took a copy of your list as it was, as a snapshot in time, and I'm saving a little database for these episodes so that people can kind of see what a tournament winning deck looked like then, and then obviously they can go look at your current list and see if it's changed or whatever the case may be. But I think it's kind of cool to have a snapshot in history of like, this deck won and this is what it looked like. Do you have any closing thoughts? Anything else you want to share? Otherwise, I think we've pretty much covered everything I wanted to talk about, and we can wrap this up.
If we go back to like cards which I'm running that typical Gretchens aren't running. And by typical Gretchens, I'm really just meaning the list done by Puzzle Box back in the day, because we have a few cards different. One of the pieces I am quite big on is Hydroform. It's a card I mentioned in the past, but basically it turns a land into a free, which allows you to put Freed from the Real straight onto the land. So it's a way to get around that haste problem that we mentioned about the untappers, where you have to wait a whole turn.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And there's a few other lines I'm running, like Vicky and Graph Mage. There's not many Gretchens I pick on that one. And it's funny because that is actually the card that made me win the tournament. Yeah, and also Immobilizing Ink, which is another like Freed from the Real type of effect. You just have to discard a card as well, which Gretchen gives you back if your land creates enough mana.
Right. That is also spicy. I've actually seen this used in games. It might be Clay's Weaver's List that uses this, perhaps, because it does some similar untapping stuff. Yeah, that may be where I've seen it before. I recognize the card, but so how did that? Oh, because you said that you had that, and then
the Voyaging Satyr with a 1/1 counter on it, and my big land with all my enchantments on it just got bounced. But I had a Rhymewood Force with like a New Horizons on it, so that tapped for 2 mana, and I had a Wild Growth in my hand. So I just Wizard cycled for the Vigian, put the Wild Growth down, and just comboed off with, some counter spell interaction.
There you go. Yeah, there's always some other way to do it. If your deck's, I mean, I guess this is just a prime example of it. If your deck's built well with enough redundancy and enough tutoring and or ways to get quote unquote get there, you're probably going to get there regardless of what gets bounced, what gets removed, etc. So well built decks tend to have a lot of redundancy and a lot of ways to just keep trying. Like, if they can't win on turn 1, or, the first time they try, they get stopped, and they try to win again. And then they try to win again, and they try to win again. And it's just going to keep happening until either they win or someone else gets there first.
Yeah, and all the combos overlap each other. Like, there's so many different lines you can do, and everything nets you mana as well. All the combo pieces are dorks. So that's just good for more Gretchen activations if you're not winning. Just draw more cards.
Right. Yeah, and in between, you very well can do that. There's lots of games I've seen where Gretchen looks like it's not doing anything. It's just drawing cards. And then, all of a sudden, it's drawn all the cards it needed. Bam, 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 bam. And you're dead. All right, man. Well, once again, congratulations on taking down the tournament. It's great to see you get a dub. I know you've been playing for a while, and, it had eluded you to this point. So, yeah, again, congratulations. Happy to see you take it down. And we'll have hopefully another one of these conversations in the future, maybe with one of your own personal spicy brand new brews that we've never seen that you take to a tournament and kick ass with. If not, obviously I will see you on the battlefield at random when we happen to catch each other. And also, if you guys like Jonathan's deck, or like what we've talked about here, you can take a look at the deck. The deck list will be in the show notes, so you can take a closer look. And also, if you want to play games with us, the Sanctuary PDH server is open to join. My server as well, Possibility Storm, is open to join. We play more cDH over on my side, but If you want to play either one of those formats between the two servers, we got you covered. Games fire all the time, so check those out. I will share Discord information for both in the show notes as well. But that's all we got for you today. I will be back the next time there's another one of these tournaments. I believe the next is the Common Cause 4, which is soonish. I don't recall exactly. I think it's within like the next couple weeks. I don't think either one of us are going to be there, but I will try to pay attention, and perhaps we'll be able to get a hold of whoever the winner is, and we'll get another one going. But that's it for us here today. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys next time.